You know, originally around Valentine's Day, I wanted to do two things. One, make a Valentine's related film as I play as this, and on the other, rank and review all of My Bloody Valentine's discography. I was late for both of these endeavors. I decided to set the film idea I had for a different time in the future, and for the My Bloody Valentine video essay, I did end up writing an entire 9,000 word script, only to realize that I had no interest in actually editing so much of what I had to say. Obviously not to say that these albums weren't anything of value, it was rather that I hadn't been intrigued in the idea of actually sitting down, editing all of my opinions for each consecutive project. Because if you're a viewer of this channel, you know that I over-edit things quite a lot. But with all that being said, MBV is definitely something interesting. Now, why wouldn't I talk about Loveless? Well, I feel like enough has been said about it. I mean, it's heavily influential and a complete game changer to the genre of shoegaze. An absolutely amazing album, but I wouldn't provide much noteworthy information to bring into consideration. And why not talk about Isn't Anything? I mean, yeah, it's a cool record. I don't actually... You know what? I don't actually have an answer for that. Does it reach the absolute quality of Loveless? Not necessarily, but you need to understand that it's Loveless. It's held such a major statement simply in the art of music, and many freaky and nerdy little rate your music boys. With that being said, I genuinely do think MBV does a damn good job at being a successor to it. Yet again, going back to what I said earlier, and I could be wrong about this, I rarely do see many people that have brought this record up in music discussion. Of course, people appreciate the project, I won't deny that, but due to the impact of Loveless, it's not discussed nearly as much.
My Bloody Valentine. No, not the horror movie, silly. I'm talking about the band. Okay, although there hasn't been an exact confirmation as to how the band got their name, I'd like to bet they might have gotten it from this slasher flick. My Bloody Valentine, otherwise abbreviated to MBV, is an Irish band that formed in 1983. Initially starting out as a post-punk band making music with a very gothic rock-inspired sound, akin to Joy Division or The Cramps or The Cure. But that would drastically change in a few years as they started following a more noise and dream pop oriented sound in the late 80s to early 90s, basically pioneering an entire genre known as shoegaze. I don't want to spend too much time explaining what the band is, because chances are if you're watching this, you already know. But the band consists of 4 members: Kevin Shields on guitar and vocals, Belinda Butcher on guitar and vocals as well, Colum O'Cusack on drums, and Debbie Googe on bass. The band has 3 studio albums, but we're specifically going to be taking a look into My Bloody Valentine's 3rd studio album called MBV, which is just the abbreviated name of the band, as I mentioned earlier. This is their most latest album up to date, released in the 2nd of February 2013. So, basically 12 years ago. I genuinely find it crazy that there was a 22-year gap between the release of this record and Loveless. I know this is not what happened, but it would just be really funny to imagine. Like, 22 years after Loveless, it's 2013, and Kevin Shields is just like, hey, let's make a fucking album again. Now guys, don't worry, if there was a 22-year gap between Loveless and this album, then surely there will be a 20 or so year gap between this album and whatever the band releases next. Seeing that it's been 12 years since this record dropped, we probably only have to wait like 10 more years. It's very easy to describe a lot of My Bloody Valentine's music as dreamy, atmospheric, melancholy, but I seriously mean it when I say that this album is fucking full of it. Everything sounds so distant and fuzzy. I don't exactly know if this is the type of record that you would immediately understand and vibe with. Just sort of have to re-listen to some tracks, give it some time, and really understand what they're going for. I mean, that especially must have been the case when this record first came out, regarding it had been such a long time since My Bloody Valentine had last put out a project. In that period of time, you obviously had young fans who began listening to a lot of what the band had to offer, along with fans who were probably there during the Loveless era, or even in the late 80s releases of My Bloody Valentine. You could definitely understand both audiences being in complete shock to see that there was a new release after 2 whole decades. I think because of the fact that there was such a long lead up to this project, people were disappointed to how it may not have satisfied the amount of years wait, but I don't exactly think in those 22 consecutive years they were slowly working up on this one album. A lot of this information that I'm about to state is taken from the Wikipedia article for this album. The recording for it started between the years of 1996 and 1997. During this time, it was recording some of the instrumentation, specifically from the guitar. During this time, the band sort of broke up for whatever reason, and then in 2006, they came back. Kevin Shields continued some of the recording sessions by adding extra instrumentation. Then between 2011 and 2012, don't know why there was a 5-year gap, but the vocals and production, bass, and everything else was basically finalized and over with. And the full project finally released in 2013.
Alright, so ignore the sudden outfit change and the fact that I'm wearing a beanie. This footage is being recorded a week after, and also I'm wearing a beanie because I got a haircut. And I don't I don't want to show it. Upon the first track, She Found Now, you're immediately hit with this wall of noise. Dreamlike vocals by Kevin Shields, this guitar that just sounds so fucking good. It's like so many years later and this band almost feels the same as it once was. Obviously changing the style a little bit, but truly sticking to their roots. But She Found Now is such an amazing opener, one of my favorites from the record. And it really does set the tone for what you can expect from the rest of this album. Fun fact, even though this is the first track on the record, apparently this was the last song they recorded for the album, completely from scratch in 2012. Contrasting with a lot of the other tracks as they were recorded sometime during the 90s and finalized much later on. We then move on to Only Tomorrow. Across this entire album, you're gonna notice a really fuzzy tone, and it's definitely present on this track. Guitar sounds incredibly distorted and fucked up here, but obviously in the best way possible. The instrumental bridge is really good, as well as the sounds that play after the second verse leading to the end of the song. And a very minor thing, but I love how the drums kick off the beginning of the track. It just sounds really satisfying. Who Sees You is the third track on the record, which is honestly an amazing track, and yet again probably one of my favorites on the album. Sonically, it's similar to the opening, maybe less ambient heavy, but still extreme on the noise, and a generally moody feeling that the sounds and vocals provide. These first few tracks are good for really setting out the general mood of the album, and it's probably the peak of the album as well. That's not to say the rest is underwhelming, there's still some outstanding highlights. For instance, the track If I Am is possibly my favorite on the entire record, which might be a wild take considering the fact that there's literally the first 3 tracks. There's this sort of wavy instrumentation, I love the guitar in this track as always. Vocals by Blinda Butcher, which sound angelic as they always do. All of this including the production, of course culminate into a sonically beautiful track. It's so hard to describe the feelings the song evokes because that's really where most of my favoritism comes from regarding this. It's just a really comforting and nostalgic listen. Don't expect me to tell you why it's nostalgic. I honestly couldn't tell you, and I don't feel like telling you. Speaking of weird nostalgic feelings, that was also present in the 7th track in another way, and it's due to the melodies that are shown in the instrumental bridge, which, by the way, that's easily one of my favorite parts from the song. It just sounds so abstract and surreal. I remember seeing a comment on YouTube that described Touched by My Bloody Valentine as a really creepy version of the music in Peach's Castle in Mario 64. And I feel that's really similar with the instrumental bridge of In Another Way. Take it as if the song was on acid, which doesn't really change much because that's exactly how Touched sounds. Now going back to the order of the track list, sorry for the way the script is written, it's just completely unorganized. Is This and Yes is just a really soothing track that's really hypnotic. Something unique about the track is its reliant use on these layered keyboards, specifically to create this droning synth noise, as well as these beeping noises that play out throughout the entire song. Sounds like it's coming from like a fucking electrical circuit. In a good way, this is one of those songs that just sound like they're calmly putting you to sleep. Like a lullaby. Initially, I thought Blinda Butcher wasn't actually saying anything in this song, and she was just humming vocals. But according to Genius, she says again multiple times. I find this song's placement on the track list really interesting because up to this point, you've had these incredibly loud and abrasive tracks with all these fuzzy and spacey textures mixed along with it. But then you listen to this song, and it just sounds like a cool down, which is common upon many albums, but I just love how it's executed here, right from the very beginning. If I Am, I'd already talked about this earlier, but just one of my favorite tracks on the album. New You is one of the more instantly poppier tracks, and that's where a lot of the quality shines through with it. It's far from one of my favorite tracks on the record, and it used to be one that I wasn't particularly fond of, but I've learned to appreciate it much more as the time has gone on. This feels like one of their more stripped back songs, unlike the rest of the tracks on the album, as well as just a great majority of the songs by My Bloody Valentine. This doesn't feel incredibly messy and layered, and it's also from that in which you get this really cohesive mixing. Now I need to bring up Nothing Is because there's no way I can't. It's basically this 3.5-minute loop of this guitar riff and drum beat. Kind of puts you in this weird trance. It's very similar to the track they made long back called Glider, which is basically just a loop of these distorted guitar chords. And the full version of it goes for like, I think like 12 minutes. Wonder 2 is a really interesting closer. Basically, you have this classic fuzzy production along with these ethereal vocals. I just spat on my laptop. While you have this loud-ass noise that sounds like a fucking jet engine preparing to take off or something. And the instrumental just sounds so atmospheric and dreamy. It's one of the most confusing and bizarre releases My Bloody Valentine has had as a closing track. yet there's something so brilliant about it. It is simply psychedelic to the extreme. Fantano mentions in his review of this album from 2013 that there really is no proper closer to this album.
However, after this, the album doesn't really present any interesting finishes or any closure or anything like that. And after that, the closing track, which I do like, however, not really as a finisher.
But I disagree fully. I feel like Wonder 2 is such a different track musically wise compared to not only anything on this album, but just most of what My Bloody Valentine has ever released. And wow, look at that. That's the end of the record. 9 out of 10. Here's a track list ranking. And I'm not done talking yet. So if you hadn't noticed in my review, I realized that I hadn't really tackled much upon the lyricism of this album. And part of the reason is that My Bloody Valentine had never really been much about the lyrics. It was always just about the noise and how it sounded sonically. Another reason was just that, I mean, there were lyrics. I couldn't really make much of a big discussion out of it. That's not to say it was bad or anything, but, like, I couldn't make any, like, unique observations or ideas. Yeah, at the end of the day, My Bloody Valentine post isn't anything. Had just been about the sound. We'll say though, it is the vocals. It is the vocals that are obviously an important part. Let me just state that, you know, there is obviously a difference between lyrics and vocals. The way the lyrics are brought out, they're beautiful, okay? They are obviously very important. Just the actual lyrics themselves, unintelligible. The music of My Bloody Valentine was something that, during the late 80s to early 90s, would have been groundbreaking. We also have to remember that this was during the early 90s, a time where genres like grunge had really become the mainstream, Nirvana obviously being a huge part of it. So albums such as Loveless and generally the shoegaze sound as a whole, I'm bringing Sovalki by Slowdive here as well. I don't even know if that's how you're meant to say the name of their album, Sovalki? I'm sorry, I don't know. These albums, which are obviously huge now, might have been more obscure or forgotten when they first released. That was until the early 2000s, in which the internet had almost brought this sound back to relevance, thanks to websites such as, oh my god, you're not gonna believe this, rate your music! It accumulated these group of people that appreciated this bold and unique sound, and it's what made the release of MBV feel so impactful as well. I've stated many times that a major attribute to the music of My Bloody Valentine has been their distorted and wavy sound. But what's also really neat is the technical side of how these sounds are produced. I mean, there's the behemoth of Kevin Shields' pedal board. These several units were helpful in the creation of the heavy reverb, the evident distortion or fuzzy tone, the several dreamy and spacey textures, and just so much more. There's then the innovative use of sampling by My Bloody Valentine, and how Kevin Shields would just record the guitar feedback, then manipulate the sound and add all the textures that I just described. I mention all of this because these techniques, which were so evident in the band during the 90s, most likely implemented them into MBV several years later. But yeah, sonically, this is such a unique, dreamlike, and honestly powerful album by My Bloody Valentine. The cover art is also one of my favorites as well. I just love the large typography along with the blue, and it completely contrasts with the cover of Loveless as well. This was a really interesting album to discuss, and for what it's worth, I really do wish the band would come back together and release something new. Thank you all for watching. This shit's gonna take forever to edit. I hope this video reaches the right audience, and I'm now gonna go back to making low quality slop. Goodbye.